I can't be the only one who hears Voldemort say this. Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. Before we get started, if you want more videos like this, don't forget to like and subscribe. Aw, not again. So Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2 was once again directed by David Yates. So Hermione, Ron, and Harry are still trying to find and destroy the Horcruxes in one huge epic finale. Before we get started, please just remember that this is just my opinion. My opinion isn't the right opinion, it's just my opinion. I'd love to hear your opinion down below. Without further ado, let's get started with some of the positives. I find that this movie from a visual standpoint has great action sequences that are truly stunning and exciting to look at. Choreography that incorporates so well with the cinematography in this movie. It feels like the culmination of everything from all the previous installments that helps make this movie feel more satisfying and exciting. Right from the start of this movie, you're into things. More on that later, but this really helps create a greater sense of urgency and tension that is built up in this movie. It's a non-stop ride of emotion and great action set pieces. You feel Voldemort is progressing throughout this movie, and you feel the clock is ticking. Probably because it kind of is.
If you do not do this, I shall kill every last man, woman, and child.
Which is conveyed well through the connection between Voldemort and Harry and creates a good sense of urgency in this movie. Once again, the character interaction and friendship in this movie with the main trio is done really well. It conveys the friendship between these characters pretty good. As well as with everyone in Hogwarts, here it feels like, let's defeat Voldemort. It explores and expands these characters well, especially with the character of Snape, who gets a lot more emotion and backstory in this movie. Sadly, I do have a few flaws with this movie. This is not a perfect movie. The first one being that it is a second part of the story of the Deathly Hallows. The first part was mostly the setup. Here, it's mostly the payoff. It uses the setup from part 1 to help tell the story without much setup here. That can muddle the storytelling in this movie and muddle the conclusions in this movie. It lacks some of the most important parts of this movie, which is setting up what's next. It struggles to tell its own cohesive story in that sense because it uses the past film to tell this story without standing on its own, which is one of the downsides of separating the story into two movies. Definitely, I would have hoped for more setup to some of the impactful death scenes as well. Here we usually get only the aftermath, which could as well muddle the conclusion to some of these impactful scenes because we only get the aftermath rather than the setup in the actual scene. Overall, I enjoyed Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. It had some great action set pieces, great characters, but could lack in a storytelling standpoint at times. I'm going to give Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2 a B+.
Quick soundtrack review.
This soundtrack was once again scored by Alexandra Desplat. This soundtrack also has memorable scores, especially Lily's theme, but this soundtrack for me also doesn't exactly fit in with the story the best. It feels more like it's focusing on being its own thing rather than fitting in with the movie. It also has some strange edits in the soundtrack that don't fit in the best with what's happening in the movie. I'll give the soundtrack a 7 out of